A woman just took an attempt at the sub 4 minute mile, and we're going to break it all down, including where it went wrong, what can we learn from it, and the fact that they actually might have cheated. Not actually might have, kind of did. So let's get into it. So Faith Kipyegon, in a special event for Nike, took on the 4 minute mile barrier. It was much hyped, lots of coverage. It was great. Kipyegon is arguably the best middle distance runner in history on the female side. Dominates the 1500 and mile, ran 349.04 I think for 1500, 407.6 for a mile. Astonishing. Head and shoulders above every other woman in history. And she took it on. Now let's start with the headline. The end result was she did not get it. She ran 406 according to Nike, 0.4. But the reality is this. When the clock stopped, initially she had 406.9. And that's what I reported. Then Nike and the people changed it, and it went 406.4. And you're like, oh, maybe they adjusted the clock. But half a second down is very rare in track. It never occurs. Well, it comes out that here's what happened. And this is what I mean by cheating. Is in all track races, every single one, your time is the gun time. The gun goes off, you react to it, you cross the finish line. That is the time. What Nike did is they eliminated the reaction to the gun. As has been reported in foreign newspapers, what they did is they took the time when Kipyegon essentially reacted and then first moved across the starting line, which was half a second later. Now you might think, well, this isn't a big deal, but in track world, this is a huge deal. A huge deal because it's never done. Not in the 100-year history of track do we ever report times like this. It always includes the reaction to the gun. And this is really important because what it does is it tells us that Nike and the folks were trying to make it look like she ran faster than she did. So that it was a second plus ahead of the actual world record, 407.6, instead of 0.7. Now, that's not a huge difference because she ran 406 point something. But imagine if she ran 4 flat 0.4. And they did the same adjustment, which it was clear they were going to do this. They adjusted the time rapidly, so it was clear this was their plan. That 4 flat 0.4 goes down to 359.9, and now the world thinks that she broke the 4 minute mile barrier, and she would not have. Track times always include gun times. This put a damper on the event, and I have a history against Nike. You can Google it, but I was excited. Kipyegon is a great runner. It was very cool to see her go for it, which we're going to break it down. But the fact that they were willing to essentially fudge the time to make it seem better tells me it was a marketing gimmick to the max, and it's really disappointing. So that out of the way, let's break the actual race down. So a couple things. Why did she fall short? She ran 406 point. This was much hyped. She was taking it on. Basically, any track coach or someone with knowledge said, hey, 8 seconds is too much. But we think she'll improve with some of this optimization. The Nike scientists were hoping that most of that optimization came from drafting and pacing. Here's the deal. When Kipyegon set the world record, she had a pacer for just a little bit past halfway. That means she ran the back half completely by herself, which she had to block the wind, she had to do the pacing. It's harder mentally. It's easier to just sit and get dragged along. It's easier energetically. You're not burning as much of energy to go against the wind. That matters. The Nike scientists thought that that would matter a whole heck of a lot. They thought if we could optimize the drafting similar to Kipchoge, then we'd get a huge boost. It ended up that we probably got about 2 seconds for that. It's my guesstimate based on the knowledge that we have. And that lines up because if you look at college track and you take a man trying to go sub 4 minutes in the mile and you stick him into one of these races where the whole 12-person field is just tagging along trying to go sub 4, the person sitting in 4th or 5th or 6th behind several other people and getting dragged along does not get a 6-7 second boost. They normally improve by 1 or 2 seconds. We know this from the real world, and that's exactly what we saw. This runs contrary or different from the Kipchoge event for a number of reasons. One, the drafting effects for 26.2 miles are a lot bigger. It's a lot longer to accumulate gains. And even there, we got maybe 2 to 3 seconds. Again, it's hard to delineate whether it's drafting or shoes or the other things, but we only got a couple seconds a mile. Second off, in the marathon, Kipchoge in a traditional race would spend a lot longer, time-wise, going against the wind by himself. So to be able to rotate people in matters a whole heck of a lot more. The other thing that differs this from Kipchoge is that Kipchoge, when he took on the sub 2 hour marathon in a similar stunt-like event, the super shoes were new. They were a huge jump. Kipyegon, they modified their super spikes, but she'd already run her world record in super spikes. What they did is they modified them a little bit for her, made them a little bit lighter, but it wasn't that significant tech jump that Kipchoge got that helped propel him to a 2-hour marathon in a similar staged event. The other stuff, the clothing, the fabric, all this hype around it, didn't matter. The problem for Kipyegon is she needed a boost of tech or something to have a shot, and even more significantly than Kipchoge, because she was technically further out. And Nike just could not deliver that. The pacing, the 13 pacers, the small shoe tech, the gimmick garment stuff, it didn't matter that much. It gave us a small boost. Okay, that's what came short. Let's go over the race itself. So, a couple of things. First off, what was interesting is she had light pace lights, which essentially locks you in and locks the pacers on to the pace that you want to try and go. It makes it where you're going to evenly distribute effort a lot better than without those pace lights. I'm going to come back to that. If you look at how Kipyegon was trying to run this sub 4 minute mile, it's clear that the people who set this up didn't think she actually had that much of a shot. How do we know this? We can tell by how the wave light pace lights were set up. They were essentially set, you can time them, to go through the first lap in 60.4. The second lap was supposed to be 60.2, and the third lap 59.6, and the fourth lap, presumably whatever was there, would speed up. No one is going to run their first sub 4 minute mile dropping chunks off of every lap. Generally, your best mile comes with a slightly fast first lap, a slight settling the second and third lap, and then a pickup in the fourth lap. Why energetically makes sense to run even splits? This is not a marathon where you run negative splits. And third of all, that third lap sucks mentally. So if you're pressing that hard, it generally takes away from that last lap. So that third lap, you're pressing to stay close to pace, but you're not doing so much that you've left it all out for that last lap surge or kick. So that pacing setup, especially the 60.4, and this is 400 meter repeats, not quarter miles, not half miles, which again we'll come back to, which is a key, subtle but important difference. That tells me that they were realistically hoping that Kipyegon ran 4:03-ish, maybe, if she had a great day. And the sub 4 attempt wasn't really realistic, even if you look at the pace lights. Now let's go back down to what actually happened. So she goes out into 60.2 for 400 meters. Now this is an important part. I'm going to give you the splits at 400, 800, 1200. The mile is not 1600 meters. That is 4 laps around the track is 1600 meters. A mile is 1609.334 meters. That 9.334 meters takes about a second and a half. It's important. So when we look at the 400 repeats, if we're actually on sub 4 minute mile pace, they need to be 59.6 something. Okay. So when she came through at 60.2, again, not knowing what the wave light lights were set up because they didn't tell us. I texted a bunch of friends in my group chat and said too slow. Essentially, no way she's coming back from that to run a sub 4-minute mile. The reason is pretty simple, is because Kipyegon was already pressing just a little bit to stay on that pace, and you've got to be essentially riding that line, smooth, hard but smooth rhythm of riding that line to run the 4-minute mile, okay? Or a little bit better. The mile is all about finding this tightrope where you're going fast enough, but not so much that you're digging into your energy reserves and going to create a debt that you're going to have to pay back. Kipyegon was pressing into that debt, but she wasn't able to press into that debt far enough and still be able to ride that line. So first lap, watching, I knew it was done. But she held on pretty good initially. 800, she comes by at 2 flat 0.7. For the half mile, this is about 201.5, give or take. 201.4. Okay, this tells us that even at a half mile, she was on basically 402 high, 403 flat mile pace. Still incredible, but she wasn't taking on the 4-minute mile. Next lap, she gets to 1200, 3019, that's a 61.2. You start to see her fade a little bit. That third lap is where you start to see the bear is starting to jump on her back, but she is digging and giving everything she has to stay close to pace. This is where I give Kipyegon a lot of credit, because it is very easy to, on that third lap, just kind of lit up and be like, there is no way in the world I'm going to be able to finish this mile if I keep pressing. This is why in high school, athletes, especially in unexperienced or JV kids or even good kids, that third lap is often the one where they settle. Why? Because it's far enough out where you are hurting and you are unsure if you can make it. The last lap we make it and we get this, I can taste the finish line. I can smell it. It's almost there. You get this burst even if fatigue is screaming at you. The third lap, you're still far away out where the fatigue is getting really high, the discomfort is high, and you're not close enough to smell the finish. So it's hard to push that. Kudos to Kipyegon, really gutsy to push it, to keep it even relatively close. The last lap is where the wheels come off. So she went 301.9, finished in 406.9 officially. Gun time, not fake time. So if we convert that down to 1600, that's 405.4. That means her last lap was 63 mid, essentially. So you can see her going from 60 points, 60 point high, 61s to 63 mid. The bear jumped on her back. And she fought and fought and fought valiantly, but the bear was on her back, especially that last 200. Now here's the key. I think if she would have run a little bit more evenly, even though she didn't go out on sub 4-minute mile pace, if she would have run a little bit more evenly in this event, she probably runs 405 high, 406 low, which again gives us about a second and a half or 2 seconds for the pacing that matters. That's the race. Let's go into a little bit of what else went wrong, maybe, and what will it actually take a female to run sub 4 in the mile, and how close are you? I think a couple things that Nike underestimated here is they obsessed over the drafting because that made a big difference for Kipchoge. And there was even a paper that came out that said, hey, if drafting was optimal, that you could get 8 seconds and get under 4 minutes. I love science, not discounting it. But I think they overestimated things a little in terms of how it applies to the real world. And then I think they underestimated the psychology a little bit. Because if you look at the drafting formation they chose, what happened is they had one guy a couple meters in front of Kipyegon, and then essentially a wing out here to shield. And then behind, they had essentially several other people, essentially a spoiler in the back. Now, the problem with this is this might be the most efficient drafting thing. I don't know. They supposedly tested it. I take them for their word. Good scientists. They probably did good work. Probably is the most efficient. But the problem is psychologically when you're in a race like a mile and you're riding that line, it helps to be attached right on someone. Why? Because you essentially get to turn your brain off. You get to say, I'm on pace. All I'm doing is focusing on latching on to this person. Stay on, stay on, stay on. And when it gets tough, you essentially stay on. Imagine there's a rope between me and the person in front of them. Do not let that break. It can bend a little bit, but do not let it break. When you're already 5 meters off, or 4 meters, or 3 meters off, it starts to feel like an eternity when fatigue is rising and discomfort is rising. Why? Because your brain is looking for ways to convince you to stop or slow down, because your brain is protective. It is saying, we're in a world of hurt. We've got all this acidosis coming up us. This sucks. Slow down to protect your muscles and everything else. And you're in this inner battle. And your brain looks for weak points to convince you to slow down. So one of the things that often happens is your perception shifts. You start to see that small gap, and in your head, literally, you think it's a huge gap. I've been in races where small gap, and it felt like eternity. When I work with elite runners in mental performance coaching, I'll have them watch races back, and before I'll ask them, what did it feel like at this point? What did it feel like when you started to fall off? And they just said, oh, the gap felt like eternity. It was so big. And then they watch it back, and they're like, oh, I was still in this. I was right there. This was not a gap. When you're watching it back objectively from third person and you're in the moment, it feels so big. So I think one of their mistakes is there was a gap there, and she wasn't riding right on someone, which helps mentally and psychologically. Let's go into, okay, can Kipyegon actually get closer? What will it take to run a sub 4 minute mile as a female? The problem for Kipyegon is this. She has world class, one of the best 3K, 5K runners in the world if you look at her endurance. 14:05 or 06, right off the world record. Phenomenal endurance coming up. The problem is Kipyegon does not have the speed reserve or speed gap. Although she doesn't run many 800s, what we know, or what we can project based on the ones she has and the other things around her, is she's probably at best ideal conditions 154 high, 155 low for 800. She's not beating Keely Hodgkinson or Athing Mu, who have run a little bit faster. She's not. So she's 154 high, 155 low. The problem is, even with best in the world endurance, there's not enough gap there. If we were to compare this to males who run sub 4 minute miles, even the most endurance slow twitch orientated can run 153 low. And in fact, the kind of rule of thumb is, at worst, you need to be able to run 152 to have a shot at a sub 4 minute mile. Ideally, 151 or better. And the problem is, Kipyegon can't do this. And the problem is, no one in the world and probably history of women's sports so far can. How do we know this? The 800 meter world record is 153 point by someone who ran it 40 something years ago, who just Googled the picture, and I'll let you come to the conclusions yourself. But it's not legitimate, let's say. We'll call it this way. So if even the most not legitimate effort in the 800 in women's history isn't quite fast enough to give us that cushion, the problem on the women's side is we don't have that speed gap. So even if we combine that with sub 14 minute 5K ability, it doesn't mix. Women needs to get faster over 800, which will then give them the ability to get faster over 1500. And the key here is whoever eventually does it, they can't be the 4.8 runner like a Athing Mo, because they need the world-class endurance. You need both 152 and sub 14 5K ability. No one has that right now. Will they have it? Probably at some point, especially if we get some tech breakthroughs. Not discounting any other nefarious breakthroughs, but especially if we get some more tech breakthroughs, probably at some point. How long will it occur? I don't know. It just kind of depends. So what do we have left here? Okay. Kudos to Kipyegon. She went for it. went out faster, even if you convert to half mile and 3/4 of a mile, went out faster than she ever has in a race and took a risk, even if she wasn't on sub 4 minute mile pace. She went for it. That is a lot of respect. This is why she's one of the greatest of all times. A lot of kudos for her. That deserves respect. What's a little frustrating is the marketing around it. Again, the changing of times to have essentially a chip time or a, moving time. Oh, that rubs me the wrong way, and it's just not right. If there's one thing that is sacrosanct in the world of track and field is you time the thing how we always time it. When Kipchoge tried to run sub 2 hours, they didn't give him a rolling start. They didn't, whatever have you. They timed it from gun to tape. Okay, we don't want to see someone try and break Usain Bolt's 100-meter world record with a 5-meter roll-in to do so, because they will. Okay, that's not how our sport works. I get that this was a contrived event, but everything else that was contrived, the pacing, the rabbits, the suit, shoes, that was all up front. They kind of hid away until track nerds figured it out, hid away that they weren't going to use gun time. That was shady. Not for that. Not surprised, but very disappointed nonetheless. Again, not on Kipyegon. She had nothing to do with this. It had to do with Nike and whoever was putting on the event who made that call. Who was it? No clue. I think realistically, it was cool to watch Kipyegon. I would have loved to see her in a actual race. Maybe instead of getting a bunch of men, get the second or third best woman in the world and have her get paced out to 1100 and 1200. That way she only has the last 400 meters to do it, and I bet she would have broken the world record and probably run just about as fast as this attempt if they would have slowed the pace down appropriately. It would have been a cooler event. Just my thought. I love seeing the attention track got. Kudos to Nike and others for bringing attention to the sport and to attention to Kipyegon. That is a plus, so we'll give them credit there. The reality is, whenever the first woman who gets under 4 happens, and it probably will be a ways, we need to wait until someone gets down to 403-ish in a legitimate race to have a shot. Whenever that happens, I'm a purist at heart. I want to see it in a regular race, normal competition, no what ifs, no caveats, no asterisks, for a simple reason. They deserve the immortality that Bannister got. And you get that when you do it when there are no questions asked. Little known fact, Bannister thought about and even attempted, I believe, a contrived attempt where he had athletes start pacing him like normal, and then he had one athlete jog really slow so that they'd get lapped, and then they'd hop in to help pace him the second half so that he had pacers during the first half and second half. I am so glad that Bannister did not choose that for when he took the official sub 4 attempt and actually got it, and instead had it the normal way. 2 guys starting at the start line. One went to 800 meters. One carried on to a little past 1200 meters and carry him most of the way there, which helps, but in a legal setting, so there are no questions. I hope whenever we see the woman who gets under the 4-minute mile, they do it in that way. No asterisks, no questions. Let me know your thoughts. Again, some really cool things. Glad we got the attention. Some really sucky things. The changing of time to essentially Strava time. That's low ball. That's not okay. But kudos to Kipyegon for going for it. Love the effort. And hopefully we got some new fans from the sport. All right, everyone. If you enjoy the content, subscribe, like the things, support my work. Thanks, everybody. Till next time. Take care.